Welcome to Lane Stream Sports here on the 440 Sports Network. I am Braden Gall. We are brought to you by 8th and Roast, 4 great locations across the city, and you can get those beans at a local grocery store near you. No Steve Cavendish today because he is boring and lazy and lame, and so Cavendish is not here. We do apologize. Sam Phalen, of course, joining us here. How are you, Sam?
Steve taking a nap on the plane? Is he not working hard? Is that
too soon? Steve is not a grinder. Sam.
Not a grinder,
He's
man.
Not a grinder.
I'm good, Braden.
Wow.
Thanks for having me on.
Although Steve did write an entire article about how he got scammed by a fake government entity and who told him he needed to go to a Bitcoin ATM or else he was going to be charged with criminal offense. And then he wrote a column
and he fell
scammed.
for that and then announced to the public how dumb he was.
Look,
who among us hasn't gone to a Bitcoin ATM?
Who among us hasn't gotten a phone call and thought, you know what, if I hang up, the police can't find me?
Yeah, right.
Of course they can. All right. Sam Phalen, of course, A to Z Sports. You can catch him all over the internet. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today because you can also catch him, of course, on Paramount Plus for me and my family in the house on the latest season of Survivor. I'm not going to give it away until we start talking about what you accomplished, but I thought you did a great job. You acquitted yourself well. We're going to talk some behind the scenes on Survivor. But obviously, it's been an interesting week for Tennessee Titans fans. So we're going to get into what happened in terms of how you cover regime change in general. I find this stuff to be fascinating, but it's interesting because it's hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on. So I want to get your sort of rules of engagement on this, how we go about covering this stuff. And also, of course, the big news in broadcasting in the city of Nashville and the state of Tennessee is Mike Keith's decision on, as of Thursday morning, to leave and head to the University of Tennessee, which is largely his dream job. Not that the Titans gig was not also a major accomplishment as it was, but we'll talk about that as it's pretty big news from the broadcasting world. Again, 8th and Roast Coffee, folks. Go to your local coffee shop. Sam, do you have like a local one that you go to? Don't use any names, but do you have one that you go to that's like real small in your neighborhood, in your area?
Oh, I've got to go to. I moved into a new apartment very recently.
Congrats.
Coffee spot right across the street, like right across the parking lot. So if I'm out of K-Cups, if I'm out of my apartment coffee, yeah, it's an easy walk right there.
All right. Number one, we need you to graduate from K-Cups to beans, where like the roast is delicious and fresh and ground right in your face. But here's the deal. Go into that local coffee shop next time and just look over at your local barista and just say, what kind of beans you got over there? Are those eighth and roast beans? Because they wholesale their beans all across the city to help good local small businesses offer the best beans in the market.
How about that? So they probably are 8th and Roast beans.
There you go. See, I didn't say it. Sam said it. So, all right. Quickly, Mike Keith here. We'll get to the regime change and covering it. But Mike Keith announces, and look, Bob Kessling was the play-by-play guy for Tennessee. He announced a few months ago that he was going to step down at the end of the year, and he has done that. I was asked by some folks in the business probably at that time, like, hey, was this something Mike Keith would consider? I have not spoken to him about it specifically in quite some time. I always thought it was an option for him. For those that do not know, he grew up in the University of Tennessee, John Ward School of Broadcasting. That was sort of like his childhood and his upbringing. It's a dream situation. His story, Sam, I'm sure you're aware. You've met him. You know him well. The story of getting the job for the Titans and meeting at a Shoney's and getting awarded the gig as a young broadcaster is one of the coolest stories in sports media. He is extremely, extremely good. The job he has done is extremely memorable. Do you have any particular Mike Keith stories or memories you'd like to share? Because it's hard to put into words what he has done for that brand and this city and the experiences that they've had over the last 25 years.
Well, I am an outsider to this city. I was not born and raised in Nashville. I'm not, I'm a foreigner to the Nashville sports market. And so when I first came down to Nashville, I didn't know much of Mike Keith or who Mike Keith was. And at the time, I was in school in the School of Communications at Lipscomb University, where I was taking a sports announcing class. And one day, my professor had this surprise for the class that we had a guest speaker coming in. And sure enough, I got introduced to Mike Keith as a student at Lipscomb. And, he came in, he talked. Again, didn't know who he was like, oh, this guy, does the announcing for the Titans. And then I started to realize, you mean there are no flags on that's you? And of course, yes, it was in fact the legendary Mike Keith. He has always been so kind, so just a pleasure to work with now as we've crossed paths and brushed shoulders at the Titans facility. Gone out of his way to say hello to me, have conversations with me, look out for me. And I knew the same way that you did when I first met Mike that if he ever had the chance to go back to the University of Tennessee, that is where his heart was. So certainly a well-deserved job for a man that I think has been waiting for this opportunity for a long time.
When you got onto the beat and got the job, you sort of talked to Mike for the first time in your sort of professional capacity? Did you tell him like, hey, dude, you came and talked to my class?
Weirdly enough, he remembered, and that's kind of like the guy that Mike kind of is. I didn't have to even introduce myself. He knew me by name. He knew who I was. He had done his research, done his homework, and remembered speaking to me when I was in college. And that to me was like, oh, it made me feel good as a young reporter. But yeah, totally up Mike Keith's alley, on brand for Mike Keith to remember that and make people feel good about themselves.
Wait, Mike prepares well?
Yeah, right.
What?
Shocker.
Shocked by that.
Does his research.
It will be fascinating to see sort of what direction the Tennessee Titans decide to go in. It is a very big seat. There are only 32 of them in the world. Much like the head coaching and general managing jobs, it's just a really big gig if you are a broadcaster, especially if you're in the play-by-play realm. There are lots of I'm not going to put any names out there. I've talked to a few of them. I have no desire to get anybody's way on this. What I think is interesting is that there are a lot of really good people in this city that are very good play-by-play broadcasters. And a lot of them like are talented enough to do the job very well. And even still, the NFL feels so much bigger than it did when Mike got the job. I don't know. You're a big Hawk Harrelson guy. Like they have their own brand, they have their own shtick, they have their own personality. Again, this sounds weird to say, but like I don't feel like anyone locally is qualified. But I don't mean that in a negative way because there's so many talented people in this town. But the NFL that's a big job. Big job.
Yeah, agreed. The NFL is so much bigger now than it was when Mike took the job, and Mike has built the thing that was the voice of the Titans, made it his own brand. And now the idea of replacing the voice of the Titans. But Mike Keith also, like all great broadcasters, like the great Hawk Harrelson that you mentioned, has his sort of Hawkisms, I used to call them, watching White Sox baseball. Mike has some of those for himself. The sack, touchdown Titans. There is a certain cadence to the way that he calls Titans games that just is so familiar to Titans fans listening on the radio. And it will be an odd change to feel like somebody from the local market who are very capable, talented play-by-play broadcasters, like you mentioned, will be stepping into a role without those things. And it is sort of created this mystique around the idea of voice of the Titans that makes it this big, awesome brand that Mike has carved and created, and somebody else is going to have to reshape it into their own thing, which is, no easy task.
I do not have any reporting on this. I've reached out to Mike and we have not talked about this, but my guess is, and if you want to chime in, you can. My guess is this has absolutely nothing to do with the week of news that has taken place around the Tennessee Titans. That if you ask me when this decision was made by Mike, was it made closer to like August or this week?
Yeah.
My bet would be closer to August, honestly. Totally. Again, with no reporting, that's just purely just me speculating here inappropriately and irresponsibly. So I do want to point out, and it sounds like you agree. It doesn't. I think there's a lot of fans who see this news 2 days after, the drama of a general manager regime change, and they think, oh, Mike's getting out of town. And I am willing to bet everything I own that's not the case.
I would concur with your assessment there. This is probably a decision that Mike has known was coming and was waiting until the end of the NFL season when Black Monday is over and these moves are being announced league-wide and certain changes. And so that's just the timing of it, and how that worked out. Maybe unfortunate insult to injury for Titans fans, but not related in my opinion.
Yep. Talk about a new era. That is for sure. All right. 8th and Roast. Everybody go buy those beans and check out their coffee, which leads us to sort of the final weekend of the regular season. They play Houston. They're wearing the uniforms. It's freezing rain. There's very few people in the stands, understandably so. Shout out to those of you, by the way, who were sitting in the upper deck in the rain for a 3-14 football team against in an uncompetitive football game. Obviously, when you are that bad, there's going to be conversations about the coach, about the quarterback, about the general manager, about the front office. Everybody's sort of under a microscope, and it's fair to criticize everybody, or at least evaluate everybody. But it's important to sort of figure out what information you have is real, what information is sort of anecdotal, what information can you base your opinions off of. I'm curious, what sense did you have about the entirety of the organization coming into the final game?
Well, I will say I found the Ran Carthon firing a bit of a surprise based on the things that I had heard leading up into the final game. I got an overwhelming sense that, while there was frustration about the season, that Amy Adams Strunk was overall trying to be patient with things, which I think is evidenced in the fact that Brian Callahan is remaining in his job, that Chad Brinker is still going to be the head honcho of sorts, calling the shots in the front office, and he was a part of this regime. So it's not a total changing of the guard that you would typically see from a team that bottoms out, but it is some maintenance internally for what the Titans feel like they need to do. I did not get any indication really up until after the game on Sunday that this was a possibility. You started hearing some talk going around league circles about the Titans general manager job and what changes were potentially being made, and Amy's heads were going to have to roll given the record. And it sort of snowballed into what I thought was a surprise, all things considered. If you would have asked me a week ago today if Ran Carthon would be the Titans GM in 2025, I would have resounding yes would have been my answer. But it felt like it happened very fast, where you heard that first, pinch of doubt, which then turned into a lot of doubt and a very big dark cloud that started to hang over Amy Adams Strunk's decision.
So I'm curious about sort of rules of engagement from your perspective on this, because I have my own, there's, there's J school rules, et cetera. But I'm curious, when you start to hear that stuff, what is, in your opinion, what is the appropriate methodology for fleshing it all out? I got to learn. We all hear stuff all the time about everybody.
Yeah.
Strange thing about the media, they like to talk. And I'm curious, sort of all right, you hear something. What are your personal rules of engagement on trying to figure out if that information is real, considering the source of that information? What do you think is appropriate for people to know about how you go about once you acquire some of that stuff?
Yeah, I think really what doesn't meet the eye to a fan that, is observing the NFL from a fan's perspective is just how political the NFL world is behind the scenes, just how much politics even go into a decision like firing a general manager or firing a head coach in Mike Vrabel. I do not believe that Mike Vrabel being fired this time last year had to do with the on-field football product that the Titans were putting together. It had everything to do with, it's kind of this behind the scenes succession that is existing within an organization where everybody is trying to get in good favor with the owner. Mike Vrabel maybe overplays his hand where Ran Carthon gets in good. And over the last year, that has sort of pivoted where now Ran Carthon is the odd man out and Chad Brinker and Brian Callahan are in good standing. That does not happen to be it's not obvious to a fan watching what exactly is going on. We view it very black and white of good football coach, bad football coach, good general manager, bad general manager. And so in the media, I think I tend to do exactly what you said. Diagnose the source of the information and then diagnose the biases and intentions of that particular source. Often what I will find is that the information that I'm getting, I don't believe it to be untrue, but I may believe it to be an opinion of somebody that could feel a certain type of way for reasons X, Y, Z. The more questions that I ask myself, the more questions where is this information coming from? What is the reason this person feels that way? What do they get out of this information being out there? What potentially could be the benefit to them if a change is made? That's what you have to ask yourself. And I think, everybody in the media world does this with everything. An agent that's talking about my players thinking about signing here, or a team draft season, right? My coworker at A to Z Sports, Easton Freeze, likes to use the phrase lying season.
Who?
And Yeah, right. We've never heard about that.
Yes, just playing.
He likes to use the phrase lying season, which I think really sums up the NFL draft very well on how teams view particular players. And then in terms of what I report, don't report, say on air or don't say on air, it all comes down to the relationships and, how much am I adding to the conversation to provide fans with the truth of what's going on behind the scenes? How much of it is hearsay and speculation that may not actually be the most, relevant information for a fan to know? And then will I burn a relationship by sharing this information? And is that trade-off worth it for me in my position?
I call it must lie situations.
Yeah.
It's the draft and it's coaching changes. College football, pro football, it's you are in a must lie situation, which leads me to like all of the statements that the team has been making. I'm curious how much you value the public messaging strategy by an organization, because like I almost don't hold it against the Titans for some of the apparent contradictions inside their messaging. A, things change over time. That's number one. But B, like you know, so and so is our starting quarterback. We believe in him until he's not, and now we don't believe in him. And it's like you have to
can look as relevant as recently as their message with the firing of Ran Carthon, and Amy Adams Strunk releases her statement. And one of the things that Amy says in the statement is that it was not just a move based off of win-loss record now, but concern for the future of where the organization was going if they stayed the course. That's almost verbatim what she says in the statement. And then you would ask the question, well, why you don't want to stay the course, but then you're keeping the same head coach, you're keeping the same president of football operations. From what is out there that I've heard, that a bunch of other people in the media have heard, Chad Brinker has kind of been the one puppeteering and pulling the strings behind personnel decisions for a year now, rather than Ran Carthon. So if you believe that Chad was the one making the decisions and you give him credit and you're concerned about the future, well, there's a contradiction even there in your actions to what you are putting out there. And you said it is all public strategy, and it is. I mean, it's PR, these announcements that the team is making in order to save face with not just fans, but the media as well, to get buy-in, to get backing. That is the toxic part of it, is the succession-esque mentality that I brought up, where maybe if you're a media member who is saying some positive things about the organization, who's drinking the Kool-Aid, it might open up a couple more doors and opportunities for you to get some access than the person who is the whistleblower on all of the toxic things going on behind the scenes. And that is the decision that media members make every year on, how much they choose to be a mouthpiece, how much they choose to try and find and speak truth, and whether or not their opportunities and career path will be reflective of their choices. I mean, it's relevant.
It is relevant. I'd like to believe, though, that most of the folks in this media market are doing the job pretty honestly. Like, I don't think anybody's doing it out of like severe loyalty to any one thing. I do think what's important to remember for folks from a rules of engagement standpoint, again, not to overuse that phrase, but like if you believe, and I was sort of speaking more about like public statements by coaches, general managers, owners, like you kind of always have to lie and be supportive of the thing you have until it's not your thing anymore. And then you can tell the truth. Like, and I don't like but that's the way it's worked in every way, in every walk of sports forever. It's like, that's why I don't really care as much about the apparent contradictions inside the statements from year to year. Like there's differences from previous year, and then there's a previous year statement, and then there's this year statement. And it's like, well, no, you just have to say we support Will Levis, and then when he's not your quarterback, you obviously didn't support him. So it's like I don't really care as much about that. I am curious about if you believe, because I've seen this on, and I'm trying not to take my cues from Twitter because it's a godforsaken place full of people that don't understand how the real world works sometimes. And I get it. It's cathartic to yell and scream about this stuff when you're frustrated. But if you believe that one side of this particular story is being peddled out there, or people are leaking information, or there's an angle being played of whatever that might be. This was certainly, I think, more the case between Vrabel and Carthon.
Yeah.
But if you believe that's happening, you're probably right. You should assume that that's happening.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, you have to assume that it's happening on the other side of the equation as well. That's important to remember.
And often, like, this is not necessarily intentional, but I do see this in media all the time. It's pretty well known, even if you look nationally and we ignore local media for a minute. Your top national beat reporters who report news faster than everybody else, each of them sort of have their own little avenue of and network of relationships that they have, that they're in tight with, general managers and coaches and players that they know well on a personal level, agents that they know well on a personal level. And we are also human beings who experience natural bias in the sense that, you would like to believe the person that you are friends with or have developed a relationship with is telling you the truth, and you would like to stick up for your friend. And so I do see this happen as well. Like you said, both sides of an equation are perhaps peddling a particular narrative. And I think you will see media, national, local, whatever it is, perhaps contradicting those narratives because the relationships that those people hold are on opposing sides of this bigger machine.
I couldn't have said it better. I just want to remind folks that is the case. If you think it's happening for one side, you're right.
Yeah.
But it's definitely happening on both sides. That's just the way this works. Like, everyone has friendships, everyone has relationships, everyone has a cell phone. That's what I always say. Like, everyone complains about tampering in college football with like the portal and stuff. And I'm like, guys, the NFL couldn't stop tampering so much so that they just made it a legal thing. Like, they just were like, here you go. We don't have rules. We can't control you because you all have relationships and you all have cell phones. Like, we can't stop you guys from communicating. So they just said, look, let's make it legal for a couple of days. You think all those contracts get signed because they're not talking? Like, give me a break with this.
My favorite day is the how much we continue to push that envelope too, of like that. All right, well, starting today, the legal tampering period is open, but like within minutes of the legal tampering, we've already got deals reportedly agreed to. That was shockingly fast.
It's like, we know that Mike Vrabel was texting DeAndre Hopkins and it wasn't tampering.
Yeah.
They just have a relationship like two normal adults. No, it's funny. It's like, I do think, and so ultimately that's, once the news breaks, it happens. I do think that they're lost in the narrative of, and again, I'm not trying to get into opinion about actually what decisions were made here. I want to focus on the coverage and sort of media strategy. But I do think that the narrative got out of control pretty quickly, that this was sort of another example of some dysfunction. And what I find interesting is I personally don't believe that. I have my own information that I've had for years that I think I feel very comfortable with my story and what I've reported on my shows. But based on what you have and what information you get, and then the narrative kind of gets its own life outside of the reporting on with fans and in message boards and on social media. Like, how do you know after the fact what you're getting is real? What you're getting is that peddling that you're talking about? How do you know when you get something that you've, and it's, I guess maybe the answer is just like, you trust the guy or the girl. I don't know, but how do you go about deciphering?
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what it is trust, and like the amount of trust that you potentially have in a particular relationship, and the back and forth that you've had. If there's a history there of information, and that information proving to be reliable or unreliable, affects the way that you view that stuff going forward. And then sort of like opinion based in how I cover it and how I talk about my opinions of it. I try and look at a lot of things in a vacuum. And you talked about the narrative getting a little bit out of control regarding the Titans and this past week, and it sort of spiraled. And I would totally agree with you. And it's not my favorite part of the industry. This is the part that I don't enjoy. And so what I try and do when I get on my show on A to Z Sports and I talk about, the Titans, or I'm writing a piece about my opinion, I like to try and take things as an isolated incident. With this particular move, you can look at Amy Adams Strunk and the 3-year running history now of fire, and point to it and say that this is toxic habits. These are toxic, dysfunctional habits that are being done by a dysfunctional owner and a dysfunctional organization. that does not necessarily mean that the individual firing of Ran Carthon is a dysfunctional move or a toxic move or an incorrect move. And so that is the way that I try and look at it, is given like I can't reverse time a year and rehire Mike Vrabel to the Titans. If I could, I would.
What?
But where I look at the Titans being at the end of the 2024 season, the situation that's in front of them, Ran Carthon's demonstrated history as the general manager, do I support the move? That is the question that I ask myself, rather than sort of formulating my opinions based off of the bigger picture trend that I do see forming. That's a separate conversation that I can have a separate day.
I do find, so I'm going to channel Cavendish because he's not here to defend himself, as we've already attacked his character once on the show. But I'll say this because he said this to me, and he basically said the first rule of holes is that you stop digging. If you find yourself in a hole, the first rule is stop digging. Second rule is get out of the hole. And I view this sort of that way in terms of the move. But again, we're not here to talk about the actual opinions of the move.
No, but that's a great example, though. That's actually, I like that analogy.
They were continually digging. They needed to stop, and this is the stopping. It does, to your point, and I find this, I don't know if there's an answer to this. I know that the game of engagement in media does not allow for us to say that conversation. It does not allow for us to say, man, if you want to talk about the dysfunction of Amy Adams Strunk and the ownership, and maybe even ask questions about who she's listening to, I think those are all very smart, very fair questions, and a very reasonable and I think very interesting conversation about this organization. It also is a very important conversation for the future of the organization. Same conversation with Callahan and Brinker and anybody else that might be involved. But I find it increasingly difficult to have the conversation that separates all these different nuances and says, well, but like, what if like this one thing wasn't good? But like, what? Okay, yes, she did this wrong, or he did that wrong, or it's it's almost impossible with our short attention spans and the incentives laid out by our media to have those types of conversations.
Yeah.
Other than in formats kind of like this, honestly.
Well, I totally agree. And I have a lot of thoughts that kind of triggered a whole thought tree for me. Because I do believe, right, sports media nowadays really isn't nuance friendly. It is very much, pick your side of the line and go at it hard and feel passionate about it. And sports fans are reflective of that way of thinking. Why is the natural follow-up question? Why do we feel that way instead of trying to get to the root cause? And I think for me, so I shared earlier, I'm not a Nashville native. I'm not a, fan that was raised in this market. I grew up in Chicago.
Okay.
I support all of the worst Chicago sports teams. And
hey, you beat Matt LaFleur finally. You finally beat Matt LaFleur.
Congrats to us. Our first road win on a Sunday in 4 years. Not an exaggeration. It's been Nick Foles was the Bears quarterback last time they won on a Sunday on the road. But I ask myself these questions about my own fandom and the way that I feel. And so I think it's twofold with a fan. So why does a fan feel this way, first of all? I think the idea of nuance is scary to a fan because the true answers are the powers that be, which feel powerful and beyond our level of understanding and therefore hopeless. It's sort of the weird analogy, but like when I question my existence in the universe as a human being, and you start to think about our place in this big solar system and galaxies and this entire universe that exists, if you really start to sit there and think about it, it starts to feel big and out of your control and beyond something that your brain will ever be able to understand. And it's uncomfortable to face yourself with that sort of question. And so the easiest way that we know how as human beings to compartmentalize our emotions and take a stance and have opinions is to simplify and go all out with our passion. And that's what we do with our sports teams and these things. Instead of acknowledging the fact that there are deep-seated issues with this organization that I will never get answers to. I will never know truly. And there's the real reason behind a lot of these moves is things that are above my pay grade because it's this internal politics. We like to, same with the US government, whatever. I'm getting so sidetracked. But this is what we do as humans to then say, okay, it's black and white. It's either good or it's bad. And that's how we dumb it down for ourselves. And then for media.
Well, my first comment, by the way, is that's why we invented religion, just so you know.
Okay.
I'm not trying to throw strays at every religion under the sun, but like trying to figure out and justify our own existence. Just pointing it out.
I mean, it is part like philosophy, right? This is why philosophy exists. Media. Why do we do it as media then? Well, quite simply because there's no show if the answer to everything, right? If we got on a Titans draft show, you and I, Braden, we sat down and you said, Sam, what do you think about this draft pick? I said, well, we'll find out in 5 years. We'll find out if this guy gets a second contract or not.
Yeah.
I like him, but we'll see. Right? That's not a good show. That's not what fans want to hear. They want definitive predictions. They want analysis. They want to learn something that they didn't know before. And so we all pretend to be experts. We do our research. Don't hear me saying that we like phone it in and lie, but right. Nobody actually knows. The GMs who are making the picks don't know. The scouts don't know. The college coaches don't know. And so we do this as media. We put on this show where we talk in more black and white than the true nuances of any situation, because it creates for engaging, entertaining conversation that fuels our craving of sports entertainment. And so it's, I don't know if you're tracking me or not. That was sort of the thought bubble and thought tree that sort of prompted.
I think my ultimate question, following up your second point about the media and sort of our style, I think ultimately the question I've been searching out, truly searching out the answer to, is how much of the blame pie goes to technology and the development of tools that are so advanced from a dopamine, truly scientific dopamine hit to the brain from an like it is no different than cigarettes, alcohol, porn, you name it. It triggers something in your brain that forces you to stay engaged. And then what is rewarded on these platforms to keep you on there so that they make money is engagement, enragement, whatever you want to call it. So what I'm curious about, but I also don't want to then excuse all of humanity and all of sports fans and say, well, you guys have no agency. You're all a bunch of sheep. Like, I don't think that's true. We all have choices. And so I truly have been searching for, like, is it what we all want and therefore that's what's been given to us, or is it the machines are so good at this shit that we can't disconnect our brains? Like the amount of, like, I have 2 daughters, and my 2 daughters are going to hopefully grow up very literate when it comes to media, social media, and the internet.
Yeah,
and hopefully we have solutions in place for children with cell phones. I know I sound like an old man, but like for me to have a Game Boy in the back of my 6th grade classroom sounds bonkers to me. Like, I would have been kicked out of school. I would have been sent to the principal's office.
Yeah.
And for kids to have cell phones playing games in their classrooms is just bananas to me. But so we know that they're like cigarettes. We know this is cigarettes of the 70s and 80s. We got to get our kids off cigarettes, and hopefully that leads to a smarter generation. But I honestly don't know. Like, fans like turning their brains off for sports. That's the whole point. It's entertainment. It's fun. It's not supposed to remind me of the bills I got to pay. It's not supposed to remind me of, family that I got to deal with or a job I got to work. Like, it's supposed to be a way to get away. And so do you want it to be simple and fed to you? I think many people do.
Are we also like thing with new media and old media, right? Because that's an interesting argument when you talk about the devices that we use to consume all of this every day. Because I've thought in the past, as somebody who grew up as a sports fan mostly in this media era, I remember asking my dad, being befuddled at the idea that my dad maybe couldn't even watch the game of his favorite team and then would have to check the box score to see who did well the next day. You couldn't go on the internet and look up highlights of the game that you missed. If you weren't watching it live, or you didn't listen to it on the radio, or you weren't in the building, you were looking at a newspaper for a box score. And the only messaging that you got about your favorite sports was stuff that was usually controlled by the team. Like, think about how easy it was for the government to control its people and the messaging that got out to its people, and for sports teams and large corporations and entities to control the messaging that they put out there. it's that PR that we talk about that the Titans were doing after Ran Carthon got fired. But if the only message that you ever heard about was truly going on within the walls of St. Thomas Sports Park is what the Titans were putting out there, you'd probably have a very incorrect view of your favorite team. You'd probably have a lot more questions. But is that what we want? Is that what we want? Is the peek behind the curtain, does it ruin the magic for a sports fan to be punched in the face with reality that your favorite team's a little bit toxic and it's not the same Titans that you grew up rooting for?
Look, Sam, you took us down this very philosophical path.
I apologize for that.
I'm gonna continue, because what I think makes great entertainment and storytelling, personally, again, maybe I'm the old guy who's middle-aged geriatric millennial father. Like, I get it. I like to stare at people in my neighborhood and say, I think you're going a little too fast. Like, that's the energy I give off now. So I get that. But I appreciate and want the human side of greatness, which includes sometimes a lot of stuff that ain't great. And I am okay with the whole picture. I don't want part of the picture. Now, that's just me. Maybe I'm not normal. Maybe I'm old. I don't know. But when I read a book about someone who I admire, like whether it's Steve Jobs or like, Robert Plant or Aaron Rodgers, like whatever, people that I looked up to, let's call it, or appreciate or enjoy their work. I don't want it sugarcoated. I don't want the Urban Meyer documentary on Netflix. I don't want that shit. I want the truth. I can handle the good and the bad because I believe all people are made up of good and bad. Like, nobody's perfect. I try to teach that to my kids. Like, we can't do everything right. And so someone who is like the person I look up to the most, I don't even know who that would be, but like, I want to know the real version. Like, I watched the Dylan documentary or the Dylan biopic recently. I don't go to theater to watch many movies, and I don't know a lot of biopics, but it's one of the best biopics I've ever seen. Not just because it was really well done, but because they didn't paint Bob Dylan in some like holier than thou light. They painted him warts and all. And I want the real picture. To your point, I don't know how many people want that right now.
I would generally agree with you in my own personal preference. I think you kept saying truth, that you can handle the truth, because truth does bring us closer to reality. It brings us closer to our teams. It makes us feel like if you're a sports fan that grew up and loved a certain particular sports team and you're hearing all of these inside stories, there is something about that makes you feel more connected to the players that you're rooting for, to the coaches that you're supporting. The warts and all are kind of what make being a sports fan worth it. You got out of the mud. If you end up, and we're sitting here 10 years from now, and the Tennessee Titans with Shedeur Sanders are winning Super Bowls, you made it out of the mud and you dealt with all of the ugly and the bad that came with being a Titans fan in this era. And so it does bring us closer to it. And some of us, I think, crave being as close to the action as possible because it's something that we love.
Yeah.
Other people, I don't think, care because they do view sports as more of that escape, that ability to turn off their brain. It's just a positive influence in their life. And perhaps that is where the disconnect is between, and what creates this very ugly picture that has been, in my opinion, Nashville media over the last 72 hours. But, any media market, when you have this amount of drama and tension going on, is people are saying the things that they're hearing, which go back to the relationships and the narratives and all of the PR that we talked about earlier on. People are saying what they're thinking, and they're trying to bring fans closer, and some fans love it and they're eating it up, and other fans don't want to hear that. They want to be filled with positivity, but we're sitting here with a 3-14 football team where there's not a whole lot of positivity to share. And it just creates more questions than answers. That makes for a very interesting time to be plugged into the Titans right now.
Do you know, like, I'm not here to educate you guy on Twitter, like that guy who's like, it's not my job to educate you. That's the response, you get.
Oh,
from people.
Sure.
But it is their job to criticize you, of course. Those are two totally different job descriptions, which I feel like sometimes is the fan who are like, no, I don't want to know the truth. I only want to be fed the good stuff about my team, but I am going to criticize you that you don't know what you're talking about my team, even though I don't really want to know. So I'm not here to educate.
Like, the outrage over the Ran Carthon firing has been humorous to me in a couple of ways, because I've never met a fan base before in my life, and granted, I haven't been as plugged into the weeds as I have with this one, but the idea that a fan base would watch a 3-14 football team, and I do these post-game shows every day. I write articles after games every day, and it's outrage, it's anger, it's sell the team, it's just negative all the time. The minute there's action and it's like, oh, thank goodness they fired Ran Carthon, it's like, why would they do that? That makes no sense. Now we're mad at this. And like complacency with being bad in a weird way. But you like, hey, we hate our team, but you're not allowed to hate our team,
That's
right?
fair.
It's like, I can discipline my kid, but you can't discipline my kid. Don't you dare discipline my kid.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there. Like I can, it's more. I think it's more of a sibling thing. Like I can pick on my little brother or little sister.
Yeah,
you can't. Like that's,
if you say that,
because you're definitely not allowed to
problems.
and because you're definitely not allowed to tell me how to parent. That's for sure. Anyway, I'm kidding. Anyway, all right. So here's the wrap up on this to me is, because you said Succession. Did you mean the TV show? Succession?
I did. Yeah, okay. I did. I mean, and weirdly, I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Because
8th and Roast is where I'm going, because you should go for the great cup of coffee, the best beans in the city, award-winning cup of coffee, by the way. 4 great locations, 2 in the airport, C and D terminals if you're flying in and out of town. And of course, Charlotte Avenue, West End, and 8th Avenue OG location, and then everywhere beans are sold in the market. Did being on Survivor help you cover palace intrigue behind the scenes at the Tennessee Titans?
Well, it's very funny that you say that, because what we kind of looked at, a while out, we were sitting there in the Titans media room halfway through the season, kind of hearing all of these rumblings going on about the Brinker, Carthon, Amy situation. And, I think it was, I got to give credit to Terry McCormick was the first person to bring this up, where he just says, this is kind of like an episode of Survivor. And I'm sitting there.
Terry beat me. Damn it.
Well, I know what these internal politics are like a little bit.
Right.
It's this constant fight to have somebody be in your good graces. And the way that we sort of described it in the media core was Titans front office of executives have been playing Survivor, trying to be Amy Adams Strunk's #1 ally. And so sometimes in Survivor, you will paint somebody else in a negative light. I can't believe they would do that to you. That untrustworthy. Hey, you do what you want, but for me, untrustworthy. You start to, schmooze. You try and get your way in there, and then it's time to vote. And John, the team has spoken. Mike, the team has spoken. Ran, the team has spoken. And we all want to know whose torch is about to get snuffed next, because it's this constant revolving door of who is the #1 ally of Amy Adams Strunk, and it's blindside after blindside after blindside.
Well, we know her number 1, 2, and 3 now. So what's fascinating is I never watched Survivor. You and I've talked about this, but not on the air. I've never watched Survivor other than like an episode or 2 in like 1999, which tells you how old I am. My wife's kind of the same way. She's younger than me, but she only watched a couple of episodes, didn't get into it. We are now whole hog on Survivor.
Yeah.
I watched in support of you and the show. I wanted to see what happened. You did a great job. I think the strategy game you played was fantastic. Everybody should go check out the show. Go watch the show. It's really, really good. And then, so of course, now we're on the previous season. So now we're watching the previous season. And now my wife wakes up and we're taking care of our sick daughter, trying to get her to school. And she's like, I still can't believe Kenzie won. And I'm going like, and I'm like, oh my God, dear, it's in your head. You've got to let it go. The point is, we're all in on it now because it's way more palace intrigue than it is actual surviving. If I want to do that, I'll go watch Alone. Great show. But we're in on this. And so I got a few questions for you. I'm curious. First of all, she wants to know, and this is friend of the pod asking, first time, long time. She wants to know, what's the bathroom situation?
Yeah, that's a popular question. Well, the bathroom situation is nature's bathroom. So we recommend aquadumps, really is the preferred.
Let's go into detail here.
Bathroom situation. So that is the go-to. But I will say later on in the game, you start to get to this point of being like, I just don't want to be wet again. Like I just, I don't want to get my clothes wet by going out in the ocean. Yeah, it's hard. It takes all day for your clothes to dry. So then you just start to be like, do I really want to go to the ocean? I will say you don't go to the bathroom much after like day 7, once your body is fully empty, and then you just don't go to the bathroom all that often. But
does anybody just consider like, I'm not going to get my clothes wet, but I'm going to the bathroom. Y'all look away. Like, I know that, is that not a thing that happens?
You could do it. It's kind of frowned upon,
Frowned
I
upon?
would
Okay.
say. Probably you're just kind of like, come on, man, really?
How accurate, after the fact, you go back and watch it. I know all you guys were watching it. How accurate across the board, whether
Mm,
it's personalities, whether it's strategies, like, are they doing their best job? I assume they are, to try to paint everything as accurately as possible in terms of, like, this is what actually happened. I know the days are very long and they can't put it all into an episode, but
yeah.
like, how accurate is the portrayal of the actual dynamics of what's going on and the real personalities that are there?
Yeah, I mean, it feels very accurate. I think no player has ever come back from Survivor and been like, "Oh, that's exactly what happened the whole way through." And the reason is because everybody's the main character in their own head. We've got 18 different versions of what happened on that island, depending on who you ask. And so I do think it is the challenge on the producers to try and find the most common thread between all 18 of those answers, and that is the story that you're telling. You're not telling Sam's story or Braden's story. You're telling everybody's story all at the same time. And so, how do these different perspectives intertwine with each other? And what is the narrative that is felt out there by the most amount of people at the same time? I'll remind everybody that these producers, these editors, these people who are cutting the show are also living the experience with us in real time. They're out there with us. They have a feeling for what is or is not relevant. They have a feeling for, when something really matters and holds weight. They know what those things are. And so I think their dedication to getting all the information and being invested in all of the information and the storytelling of the show helps them to paint as accurate of a picture as possible. Where most of the people I think that watch the show back, it feels very accurate to our time.
There seems like there's enough lag time. They obviously have a lot of work to do to get the show put together. They shoot all this footage, then they got to come back and do all the work to edit it all, and it's a couple of months lag time between filming and then actual publishing on broadcast. I'm curious, like, because the jury's job is so important. And I didn't even know this about the end of the show, but the jury's job is so important to depict the winner. How, like, they know everything that's happened, right? Like, they know all the moves, they know all the details. They're back at another location, sort of like waiting till the show's over. How much do they actually know the inner workings of a decision that you might have made, or hey, someone else won this, or like, because a lot of times I'm
Yeah.
just curious, because there's no chance they've edited and cut all this stuff together for them to
No,
see. So how much footage is being shown to the jury to make sure they're making as accurate a decision as possible?
there's no footage shown to the jury. The jury does not see any cut of the show. They're informed a little bit about, like, hey, the immunity challenge, this is what the challenge was. It was this big physical thing with a puzzle at the end, and it came down to these two people, and it was very close, but so and so pulled it out. That they are informed of that, and then really all they see is what they see at tribal council, which is usually just discussions between the players to Jeff, where we recap the day, and it might be true information, it might be fake information where people are lying, because while you are speaking to Jeff and you're speaking to the jury,
You haven't voted yet. Yeah.
you're also speaking to the other people sitting in
Yeah.
front of you. So it could be fake information because the votes have not been cast, like you said. So one of the most challenging aspects of the game that can't really be translated through a TV screen, I think, uh the information that the jury gets is going to be a count from whoever is voted out. If you've got three
Yeah.
people on the jury and you're just vote out another fourth person, that person who goes to the jury, they'll say, "What happened the last 2 days? Tell us in detail why you think you went out." That person gives their own perspective. By the end of it, you have a pretty clear picture of what happened,
Okay.
but perspective is different. Perspective does not always meet reality of a particular move. I might have controlled a move and had a really huge influence in a move, and somebody who went to the jury who told the story of that move might have perceived it differently, and now all of a sudden the narrative is different from reality or my reality, whatever that is. Which is what makes that final tribal council so important, because it is your chance as the only three people left in the game who have not had the opportunity to speak to the jury and set the record straight yet. Your job is to paint that picture for them of all of
Yeah.
the things they missed about your story. Now, can you override the presuppositions they've made before that final tribal council? Maybe, right? But that is ultimately the game within the game that you're playing while you're out there.
The season before you, I was joking about Kenzie. I'm not trying to give anything away because I don't want to talk about your season on this, because I'm curious, as somebody who doesn't know. I've not watched 47 seasons. I don't know.
Yeah.
The season before you guys, a guy who I thought named Charlie played the game near perfectly, won immunity challenges, strategically sort of was in power in a lot of different votes. He made the definitive move of the season, in my opinion, when he sort of flips on his best friend named Maria. And Kenzie, who eventually wins it, is extremely likable, also very talented and very smooth and social, like both very deserving. My wife and I are looking at each other like, this is he should have won. Like, he'd played a far better game. But I'm curious, over the course of almost 50 seasons, is it okay, from your expertise, like you've been on the show, you know the show, you're an avid fan, is that just the nature of the game? Is that just the way it goes, where a jury can decide, like, no, we're going to get, because they all said why they voted for her, and they all said a bunch of reasons that had nothing to do, in my opinion, with playing the game. Is that sort of the beauty of the game, or is that where, like, me and my wife are right, like, oh, he got screwed in this? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I think my answer to that would be everything that people listed for why they voted for Kenzie is the game. Has everything to do with the game, because the game is as much of a social game as it is a strategic or a physical game, sometimes more. I believe this fully, that the jury has never gotten it wrong in the history of Survivor. The jury always votes for the right person, and the right person is always the winner. What Survivor is as a concept, and the way the game is designed, I think ensures that. I think it's okay to say, for me, Braden, watching season 46, I would have voted for Charlie. I think it's okay for you to say that and feel that way based on your criteria. But I think one of the things that you have to weigh as a player is knowing that my criteria for what makes a good game is not the 17 other people's criteria. And how do I make sure that the game that I play is most aligned with the criteria that I assume they're judging by? And that's what you try to get to know about the people around you, is what do these people value? How do these people want our season to be remembered? What kind of a person? Because there are seasons that people do vote on who is in the most strategic control. There are seasons that they vote on who won the most immunity necklaces. There are seasons that they vote on, I like this person the best, or there's seasons that they vote on where they just say, we just don't like you, so we're going to make sure it's not you. All of those things happen. I think they're all valid, and it is on the players who are in the game to assume and predict what exactly the criteria of the jury is going to be, and then adapt the way that they're perceived to, best accommodate for that.
All right, Chad Brinker. Okay. No, it's funny because, like, this one guy gives a reason for voting for Kenzie, not to go back to 46, but he's like, she needs the money more and she's going to do something with it that matters more, which I don't disagree with. I just didn't know that was part of the criteria. And if what you tell me is that that's sort of the way it's designed for 46 seasons, then hey, that's the way it's designed for 46 seasons. So.
It's why, like, Jeff Probst, the host of Survivor, loves to say that there's no right way to play the game. There's a pretty common thread that you can be like, all right, this is good strategy and sound strategy versus this is not a smart thing to do. But the real way to play Survivor is relative to the group of people that you're with, relative to your situation, biases that may exist against you, the way that the culture of your season is a big thing that we liked to bring up on 47, of just, is this a group that is super paranoid? Is this a group that likes to talk? Is this a group that likes to make big moves? Is this a group that values loyalty? What is the culture of the group of people in this community that you're forming? And then, that also impacts the way that people see the game. It's what makes Survivor endlessly complicated, but also endlessly entertaining. 47 seasons in, like, as you and your wife go back and watch all of these old seasons of Survivor, one thing that you will find is that it's very hard to find two winners who are the same, because there are different permutations of each of their games relative to the group of people they play with.
Well, and that's the common theme, right? You need to be an empath who can take in accurately what someone else is thinking, feeling, and being and respecting, and that's the common thread. All right, last one here, and I'll let you go. I do appreciate it. Eighth and Roast, everybody. A to Z Sports. Check out all Sam's work, etc. I'm curious, like at the end of every season, if you don't know, people listening, you guys they award the winner, and then you guys immediately, like you're seeing the crew run out on camera to like change things around. You do a little sit down, you kind of do an after party or whatever. I'm curious, what happens after that when the cameras are shut off? Is there downtime? Are you all traveling together? Do you all have like a celebration? Like, tell us what happens after all that's over.
Yeah, there's like a miniature party that happens afterwards, right there on the tribal council set. After the camera's cut, you continue talking to producers and the people that you spent time with out there. You finally get to like talk to them, because while you're out there filming the show, it's, you're focused on the game. You're in the game. It's very immersive. You go back to the resort that they have the cast stay at after you leave the tribal council set. They call it Ponderosa. And usually it's a party, depends on how late people want to stay up and do it. But like, you finally get to like eat, you get to, drink, whatever. It's all inclusive. They got great service people there that are taking care of you. Get a good night's rest, and then the next day you are on a flight from Fiji back to Los Angeles, and you are just kind of like dropped back in the world. They give you your phone on the airplane, and you're like, whoa, what is this thing? I haven't seen this thing for a long time.
The dopamine starts hitting again.
Yeah, it all does move very fast from like the end of filming to the time that you're back home. But yeah, it's usually back to the resort, little party,
Okay. All right. Well, there you go.
Or don't, whatever you want to do.
There you go. It reminds me of the dopamine thing, not to go back to our previous conversation, but it reminds me of, I was talking to a gambling expert on ESPN the other day, and I asked him about sort of that same topic, and he basically said, like, when I was a kid, the back of a baseball card is what got my brain excited. It's what gave me my dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And I remember like thinking that's exactly how I grew up too. Like I remember like pulling up a card or a newspaper article with all the stats for the NFL games, and like that was the thing that got me aroused, was like this statistical stuff, and it's like it's just not the way we do it anymore. So I don't know why that just hit me. I just remember.
I'm still that way. I love like
I'm the same.
I'm the modern version of that, where I like every Monday I love going through NFL box scores and then just clicking on dudes and seeing the updated stats. There's something about being like, nice. Dude's got 500 yards now. Like,
title of the episode, clicking on dudes.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the one thing that you wish would have been shown about your experience on the eye? Like what do you think? Like, man, I wish they would have shown that. Like, is there anything at all?
In general, I think you have like relationships that mean a lot to you, and like a lot of intention behind everything that you do. And of course, when you're watching the show back and they're telling the story of 18 people, like you, like I brought up earlier, there might be something that you're like, no, I did that very intentionally, and you're not showing my full reason behind doing that. And of course, it leads to the internet making assumptions about this, that, and the other thing, which is, frustrating, because people are making assumptions based off of not having all of the information, which again leads us back into, the point I made earlier about nuances and the content that is created off of nuances. And if we showed everybody's deliberate thinking and we were just like, well, it made sense for the information that the person had in the moment, it wouldn't be all that fun to watch the show and criticize the people that you think are playing stupidly. So relationships are probably the biggest thing. If you have a very close relationship out there, I know even from early on in the merge, Genevieve and I were very, very tight. We worked great as like an alliance and just as friends. It felt like that relationship didn't get shown to the audience for a while until it needed to be shown, like later on. And so there was a couple times I'm like, oh, no, show a little bit more of like our dynamic out there. And, I know that a lot of my castmates felt similarly. That there was a relationship or two that meant a lot to them in the game and was pretty formative to their experience that didn't translate through the TV screen.
Well, it's hard to put all of that into the whole thing.
I mean, and Survivor has you'll be shocked when you go back and you watch old seasons of the show. and I'm talking old, even just a few seasons ago, before season 45, episodes were 60 minutes, not 90 minutes. And so they had much less airtime to show a lot of the personal dynamics that existed. There's a lot less fleshed out strategy. And even if you were to go back to the 20s or, the teens of Survivor, it's still HD. It still looks relatively modern. It doesn't look like a different product like the first few seasons do. But the lack of clear strategy from every character is shocking. I mean, you will watch somebody, who like the main 4 or 5 people are pretty early on, because you're like, these are the only people that we're seeing anything from. There's people that just do not exist on the television show to an audience member. So that is an intentional pivot that they've made recently that I think is a really positive one for the viewership experience. But it's somehow, even with 90 minutes, even with being intentional about showing everybody's story and getting everybody in there, we're all still left being like, well, there's not enough of this or that. So
I didn't see anybody catch a fish. You know what I mean? Like,
I did do that, by the way, on a spear. On a spear.
You did catch one on a spear?
I did catch one on a spear the day of Operation Italy, if you know what that is.
You would have won the game if I had seen that. Come on.
Right. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, it was day, I want to say 22, I believe it was. And I was kind of playing dead, just being like, hey, I'm going home tonight. Would like to go fishing by the reef before I leave. I'm in Fiji. So to play into this narrative of the fact that I was just a dead dog, I went out and went fishing and spent the afternoon, a couple hours of the afternoon, just fishing. Rachel went out with me. I grabbed the spear, some flippers, a snorkel. We swam about a mile offshore where like the reef dropped off. And so then I was diving down, and like they have an underwater camera guy who's down there with you, swimming with you with an underwater camera.
That's great television. What are they doing?
You're down by this like super colorful reef. There's like sharks, all kinds of fish. And I caught a couple red snappers on my spear. Went back to camp feeling like Aquaman with a spear full of fish going. And
didn't even make final cut. Not 1 second of that makes final cut.
I mean, they had a lot of elite strategy that they needed to show the people too. Like they had a lot of content for that.
Very good episode. Very good episode for sure. And a tip of the cap to the game you played for sure. So
thank you so much.
But man, catching snapper on a reef, come on.
That is a good one to actually say. Is that something I would have liked to be shown, because I'm a city boy from Chicago who now lives in Tennessee, who's surrounded, like all of my friends from college and all my friends that I am around all the time are outdoorsmen. They go hunting, they go fishing, they do all this outdoor stuff. I needed my roommate to help me practice making fire, which did not go very well when I tried to practice making fire back home. But these are natural things to them, not natural things to me. And I was pumped. I've never been fishing like with a line and a pole ever. And so I was like, kind of cool. The first fish I catch is like this colorful red snapper fish from Fiji on a spear while I'm in my underwear off this reef in these islands. I thought that was pretty sick. So I kind of would have liked if that was public information.
Well, I agree. I think that would have been good television. So do appreciate you coming on. I know we're a little longer than we expected to go, but I do appreciate it. Big week for Titans fans. What do you want, fans? Are you okay with the truth? Can you handle the warts? I think everybody gets to decide that for themselves. And everybody go watch Survivor. It's I can't believe I'm saying this. I feel very old, but also I feel like it's like a young person's game now. So like now I've come full circle on this, and my wife and I are in, so we'll be going back and watching episodes for a long time. But go to 8th and Roast, of course, A to Z Sports. You can check out all of Sam's work there. Do appreciate everybody listening. Thumbs up, notifications. You guys know the drill. Last but not least, my 6 and 8-year-old daughters have a better palate than you. I just want to point that out.
That's fair. Most 6 and 8-year-olds probably do.
We hold them to a high standard. I'm just saying. They've
got lots of watermelon and pineapple in there.
My youngest one loves watermelon. They eat avocado and hummus and edamame. I'm just telling you, like, they got pretty good palates. I mean, you're like
the watermelon is losing credibility for me though. That's
it's fair. That's fair. Sam, thank you so much, man. I do appreciate you coming on. Thank you.